In 2017, Disney announced its newest venture to provide guests with a premium theme park experience, the Star Wars Galactic Starcruiser. This fully immersive hotel was billed as a 2-night role-playing, choose-your-own-adventure cruise. Narratively, guests would embark on the Halcyon, a Corellian starcruiser celebrating its 275th anniversary, while the Resistance and First Order board the ship. Opening in 2022 and booking at a minimum rate of $2,400 for 2 nights, the hotel operated for 18 months before closing in 2023. Now, I'm not here to give you a full history lesson on the hotel and its failure. Jenny Nicholson has an entire video that does a much better job explaining that than I ever could. Instead, what I wanted to talk to you about was the magic of corporate synergy. Seeing an opportunity to promote the IP, Disney wasted no time implementing the Halcyon across the entire Star Wars media empire. It's kinda unbelievable how hard they tried to make it happen. Comics, to novels, to animated specials, nowhere was safe from the Galactic Starcruiser. Frankly, I'm surprised it never appeared in Young Jedi Adventures. That being said, while the hotel is gone, all the tie-in media still exist. So let's dive in and see just how hard Disney tried to make the Galactic Starcruiser happen. Released before the hotel was even open, The High Republic Mission to Disaster was a middle school novel that hit shelves in January 2022. For those that may not know, The High Republic is set around 200 to 300 years before The Phantom Menace. In this novel, the Jedi uncover a conspiracy that jeopardizes an entire planet's stability. To evacuate the planet before it blows, the Jedi agree to use their space station, the Starlight Beacon, as a life raft. However, the beacon's hyperdrive is not yet operational. Therefore, the only solution is to tether the station to multiple starcruisers and make a tandem jump to hyperspace. Do you see where I'm going with this? While dozens of ships are used to perform the jump, the one given the spotlight is, of course, the Halcyon. This first appearance of the Halcyon is, to me, the funniest because while hundreds of civilians are performing this heroic act, we have to make sure to point out that the cruise ship is helping too. Because if there's one thing middle schoolers are going to do after reading this book, it's go, I want to visit the ship that towed the Jedi across space. And just in case this story is too much for your little ones, it's recounted again in the Little Golden Book, The Battle for Starlight. Okay, so we started pretty small. The Halcyon had a very minor appearance in a middle school level book. So what if we step it up a notch and give it an entire comic book mini-series devoted to the ship's lore and history? Does that sound like something you'd like? Well, too bad. Starting in February 2022, a month before the hotel opened, Halcyon Legacy consists of 5 issues, each showing the Halcyon at a different point in the Star Wars timeline, leading into the events of the hotel itself. Honestly, this isn't the craziest promotion Disney has done. Tie-in comics for new Star Wars media are standard. Plus, if you're not familiar with how comics are released, issues are released monthly. Meaning with this comic, Disney had 5 months of promotional material lined up for its new hotel. Issue 1 begins in the present day, aka the sequel trilogy between The Last Jedi and The Rise of Skywalker. Set 1 week before the events of the theme park, the ship is at its most familiar, including the same droids, crew, and living spaces that hotel guests would see on their visit. However, the ship falls under fire from the notorious pirate Crimson Jack, who is clearly not Jude Law's character of the same name from Skeleton Crew. Honestly, I'm surprised the cruiser was never mentioned in that show. There could have easily been a throwaway line about one of the rich kids going on a cruise or Captain Silvo attempting to rob the ship. Flashing back to the High Republic, we're told about an attempted hijacking of the ship that was thwarted by the Jedi, leading to the architect building the lightsaber training pod in their honor. This is, of course, the real-life laser tag game that exists in the hotel. I feel I must also point out that the ship's architect is an Anzellan, the same species as Babu Frick and the mechanics in The Mandalorian. The real-world hotel actually did have tiny doors that were supposed to belong to him, which I think is a cute touch and great world building. Frankly, they were ahead of their time, because now everyone is quoting those little guys on TikTok.
No squeezy! Bad baby! No squeezy! Ah, horrible baby! Good shot, baby!
Honestly, this first issue is exactly what you think it is. Mostly a giant ad that adds some lore reasons for the features in the real-life hotel. Issue 2 shows the ship operating as a gambling vessel during the prequel era, while under the ownership of the Hutts, during which Aura Singh and Zam Wessel go on a rescue mission to save a kidnapped passenger to pay off their debts. It is interesting to see that the ship wasn't always just a cruise ship / hotel. It's over 275 years old and has been owned by just about everyone in the Star Wars galaxy. It stands to reason that it would have undergone some changes over those years. Issue 3 continues the adventures into the prequel era, picking up during the Clone Wars. Here, Anakin and Padme go undercover as a couple on a romantic getaway. I wonder whose idea that was. While on the ship, they of course use all the real-world facilities, like the training room and the climate simulator, before being interrupted by Asajj Ventress, because we have to keep shoving as many fan-favorite characters onto the ship as we can. Meanwhile, in the present day, we learn that the pirates are looking for a Resistance spy aboard the ship. This is the funniest entry in the series, seeing as the banter between Ventress and Anakin is always good, and the Hutts are laughably appreciative of Padme's diplomacy at the end. So, not really much of a difference lore-wise from the previous issue, but still a fun time on the Halcyon. Issue 4 jumps us to the time of the original trilogy, when the Empire seized control of the Halcyon and used it as a private storage and shipping vessel. Here we see an elaborate heist pulled off by Hondo, Lando, and Maz Kanata as they break into the ship's impenetrable vault. Meanwhile, back in the present day, the Resistance spy gives his granddaughter a Kyber crystal necklace. Conveniently, you can purchase the same necklace at the hotel gift shop and within Galaxy's Edge. Again, this was a fun adventure aboard the ship that I could see actually having some importance to the lore, seeing as Hondo is in the current iteration of the park. Issue 5 is the conclusion to this mini-series, where we rewind in time to between Return of the Jedi and The Force Awakens. We learn the origins of one of the Halcyon's permanent residents, Artess, whose partner booked her a century-long stay on board using stolen credits. Honestly, I don't know why she wasn't a character wandering the real-world hotel. How are you going to set up a character who lives on the ship permanently, but is nowhere to be seen during the real-world hotel experience? Interestingly enough, though, the First Order Lieutenant, Harmon Croy, who wanders the real-world hotel, does show up at the end of the story, remarking that he'll investigate the Halcyon for Resistance spies himself after the pirates' failure. This is actually a nice setup for his appearance in the real-world hotel. Meanwhile, the Resistance delivers the necessary information to V, the Galaxy's Edge original character. So, overall, this was an interesting but not essential little comic run. It's different from the other pieces of media I want to talk about in this video. While the other things on this list shoehorn in the Halcyon, it is the main subject of this comic. It was interesting to see the ship in different eras and how it was used. It's also interesting to see how often the ship was attacked. I would consider the ship cursed at this point, seeing as it would be attacked by Supreme Leader Kylo Ren a week later in canon. Overall, it is your standard tie-in material they do for every Star Wars project, with plenty of advertising of the things you can do and buy while on board the Halcyon. Next up, in August of 2022, 6 months after the hotel began operation, was the LEGO Star Wars Summer Vacation animated special on Disney+. I've covered this special before in another video and actually think the stories told are kinda cute. However, the framing device for these stories is maybe the most blatant product placement in a cartoon made for children that I've ever seen. Set in a post-Rise of Skywalker adventure, we join Finn, Rey, Poe, and the rest of the gang as they board the Halcyon Galactic Starcruiser for a summer vacation. You heard that correctly. Our gang of beloved characters boards the famous role-playing Star Wars hotel, which serves as the framing device for this special. Interestingly enough, this is the farthest we've seen the ship in the timeline, which raises more questions. If this is set after the events of The Rise of Skywalker, why did they choose to vacation here? Rey just fought Kylo here, and Chewie got thrown in the brig a few months ago, in continuity. Naturally, we also get new lore updates, such as that Lando has become the ship's ambassador. What does that mean? Well, I hope you weren't expecting this special to tell you. The most we see of him is a hologram that greets guests in the atrium, something not seen in the real-world hotel. Frankly, Disney loves showing off their hologram tech in the parks, especially within Galaxy's Edge, so I'm surprised they didn't add Lando or another iconic character to the main atrium. The gang then quickly splits up to show the viewer as much of the hotel as possible. Poe plans to play shuffleboard and the engineering room experience, an interactive activity offered in the real-world hotel. Meanwhile, Rey and Rose go drinking and tanning in the climate simulator, the outside portion of the real-world hotel. Though, strangely enough, it's shown as a pool here, even though there was no pool in the completed hotel. The droids go to the spa/oil baths, which I could not find a real-world counterpart to in my research of the Starcruiser. Smells like false advertising to me. While his friends have fun, Finn goes to have a depressed drink in the Sublight Lounge, the actual dining room of the hotel. Poe also takes the time to enjoy the all-you-can-eat buffet, another feature included in your real-life stay on the Galactic Starcruiser. Can I say, it's kind of impressive just how much product placement they managed to squeeze into this special. They even include Finn taking a shuttle trip to the surface of Scarif to show how hotel guests will take pods to the surface of Batuu in the real world. This one gets an A+ in shameless marketing from me, though I'm not sure who it was all for. The special is clearly made for young children who aren't going to book a multi-$1,000 trip. I guess you could say it was made to show the kids all the cool stuff they could do on the Starcruiser and beg their parents to book a vacation, a la every ABC show that has a Disney World episode. Finally, we get to the meatiest entry on this list, 2022's The Princess and the Scoundrel by Beth Reeves. This is an adventure romance novel that recounts the events of Han and Leia's wedding and honeymoon following the Battle of Endor. Now, their wedding is beautiful. It's set on Endor, all their loved ones are there. Lando dresses Han in some Alderaanian clothes that he had stashed away, and the Ewoks craft their rings out of amber. Like I said, it was a beautiful ceremony for the happy couple. And then can you guess where their honeymoon takes place? I'll give you a hint. It's plastered on the front cover of the book. That's right. Han and Leia spend their honeymoon aboard the Halcyon Starcruiser. Now what's insane about this is that despite the book being set mostly on the cruiser, it actually feels a bit like a company-mandated product placement. Han and Leia literally plan to spend their honeymoon traveling the galaxy in the Falcon, when Mon Mothma steps in and asks them to instead use their honeymoon as a publicity stunt to prove the Empire is gone, booking them a cruise on the Halcyon's maiden voyage since being freed from the Empire. The Rebels/Chandrillans have taken the ship back from the Empire, which was using it for military purposes, as we saw in the Halcyon comic. With a little bit of TLC, they've turned it back into a functioning cruise. Which, can I just say, turning Han and Leia's wedding/honeymoon into a big commercial for the New Republic is so odd. And if that wasn't weird enough, the publishing company actually hosted a contest to win your own honeymoon cruise on the Halcyon. 'Cause nothing says I love you like being locked in a Star Wars themed hotel for 2 days. It's from there that most of the book takes place on the Halcyon and wastes no time having Han and Leia interact with every piece of the ship possible. Upon boarding the ship, Han immediately notes that the Halcyon has 13 engines and could possibly be faster than the Falcon. Because again, the Halcyon is the coolest ship in the galaxy and you really want to go there. On top of that, they're greeted by the same crew as in the other media because they're all droids or super old aliens. Something I did find interesting is that the ship does have sabacc and other gambling games in the parlor, but they are not played for money, just for fun. This aligns with the real-life sabacc table they had at the hotel, which is just for fun, since Disney won't allow real gambling in its hotels. Many of the architecture and artifacts that could be found in the real-world hotel are also found during Han and Leia's stay. The hyperspace compass, which is a main plot point of the hotel roleplay adventure, is highlighted as being part of the center of the ship, catching Leia's eye. They even find some time to, let's say, break in the Starcruiser on its maiden voyage, which is crazy, because while yes, this is a book aimed at young adults / an older demographic, I don't think Disney would be encouraging you to in their hotel. They visit the climate simulator and access their cabin via wrist communicators, just like hotel guests using their magic bands would. And the bridge tours that were available to hotel guests were actually Leia's idea, suggesting the cruise line add it to their itinerary for curious guests. It's also because of Han discovering possible Imperial remnants on the ship that the cruise line keeps the brig in use. I'm sure Chewie will really appreciate this contribution from Han in 30 years when Chewbacca is thrown in the brig by the First Order. Interestingly enough, Han carves his and Leia's initials into the engine room, which I don't think can be found in the real hotel. Sounds like a missed opportunity to me. I can picture it now, an excited hotel crew member pointing out the iconic graffiti to hotel guest. Along their journey, Leia convinces the ship crew to make a stop on Madurs for a diplomatic mission. While on Madurs, the pair discover that the Empire has a secret but still active Imperial drilling station on the planet. At this station, they are mining the planet's core for chiralium, destabilizing it. When Leia asks the Halcyon for help taking out the station, the captain says protocol calls for evacuation, since the Halcyon is to remain neutral in all military conflicts. Which is fair because it is a civilian vessel. That would be like asking a cruise ship to attack an oil rig. But at the same time, the Halcyon is armed to the teeth with cannons, and the ship gets attacked every 3 days, as we've seen through this extensive history lesson. That being said, the Halcyon does get forced into the conflict when Alicia Beck, an ISB agent with a personal grudge against Han Solo, attempts to drown the lovely couple. You see, when the guests depart the Halcyon, they're provided with thermal discs to keep their bodies at a comfortable temperature. That's something I wish Disney World could implement in the real-world experience. Orlando, Florida was not meant to be inhabited by humans. Anyways, when the two are rescued by the Halcyon crews, it's revealed that the thermal discs have trackers in them, so the Halcyon could find lost guests. Something I'm sure Disney would love to do. Imagine the possibilities of them tracking your every move throughout the park. At the climax of the book, the crew of the Halcyon offers to evacuate the civilians of Madurs once they learn that the planet's core has been compromised by the Empire's drilling. But that's not where their involvement ends. In fact, the Halcyon is essential to this book's finale. After Beck tries to make an escape on an Imperial shuttle, Han takes control of the Halcyon and physically rams Beck's shuttle with the Halcyon to stop her hyperspace jump. This leads to her capture by the New Republic. So much for the Halcyon remaining neutral. Thank goodness that the Halcyon is the coolest and best ship in the galaxy, and it doesn't end there. Thankfully, the Halcyon can also use its new tractor beam technology to stabilize the planet's core. Again, it's crazy that the Halcyon became the magic ship that solves everyone's problems by the end of the book. At the end of it all, I enjoyed the book and think it's crazy how clear the product placement was. It's very funny how much of the stuff guests could experience at the real-world hotel is because of Han and Leia. Again, we have to connect your favorite characters to the stuff you can do in the hotel. Also, while I can't find anything to back this up, the book kinda feels like the writer had a romance novel in mind and was made to set it on the Halcyon. Which is tragic, because Han and Leia's relationship in this book is really cute. But the Halcyon barges in, interrupting the story at every turn. It's not the most offensive piece of product placement, but it's certainly going to be an interesting piece to look back on after the hotel has been long gone. Speaking of which, just 9 months later, in May 2023, Disney announced that the Starcruiser would sail its final voyage in September 2023. So that was it. The hotel was considered a failure. It would quickly wind down operations over the next 3 months to save the company as much money as possible. However, if you've been paying attention to the runtime of this video, Disney had one last piece of corporate synergy before they nailed the coffin shut on the Galactic Starcruiser. In June 2023, 1 month after the announcement of the hotel's closure, LEGO Star Wars released the animated short Vader's Vacation. As the title implies, Palpatine decides that Vader is too stressed and needs a vacation. And as I'm sure you've already guessed, yes, that vacation is to none other than the Halcyon. Which doesn't technically align with continuity since the Halcyon was used as storage by the Empire, but let's not nitpick the 5-minute short for babies. While on their cruise, they attempt to relax in the climate simulator, aka the pool, which again makes me realize how insane it is that the real-world hotel did not have a pool. This is a 2-day experience where you're locked in the hotel, and Disney couldn't even provide guests with something as simple as a pool? Especially since this is the second time they've shown characters going to this non-existent pool. Afterward, our 2 Sith Lords take a pod, the real-world hotel shuttles, to the planet below, Niamos. Now if that name sounds familiar, then you've probably watched Andor, because Niamos is the planet where Cassian Andor gets racially profiled. Insane overlap with the silly LEGO short. Also an insane place to stop on a luxury cruise. Hotel guests would be better off staying with the group or risk getting snatched up by the Empire. Then, before our dastardly duo can return to the Halcyon, R2-D2 reprograms their pod to go to Hoth instead of returning to the Halcyon. Which again, obviously it's a little LEGO short for babies, but the implications of that are crazy. Almost everyone in Star Wars has some form of astromech droid, especially anyone who can afford a trip aboard the Halcyon. You're telling me these things have a port where any civilian can ask their droid to reroute to a different star system? So, that was every time Disney tried to make the Galactic Starcruiser, aka the Halcyon, happen. They created a very intricate lore around the ship that very clearly had some passion behind it. However, the lore also proves Disney made the right call in decommissioning the ship. Clearly, it's cursed. Look at everything that happened in the lore. From pirates to Hutts to the Empire, no one left this ship alone. Han and Leia couldn't even enjoy their honeymoon, for Pete's sake. Plus, in the lore of the real-world hotel, the Halcyon is even attacked on its 275th anniversary by the First Order. Clearly, the Force did not want this ship to continue sailing. Granted, I'm not going to pretend like this wasn't a valiant attempt to make fetch happen. Lucasfilm clearly spent time and money hiring creative writers and artists to make the Halcyon an interesting place, where all our favorite characters have been. I think they put more effort and planning into the silly Star Wars hotel than they did the sequel trilogy. But it ultimately didn't work. The real-world hotel was too expensive, and these lore attempts were targeting the wrong demographics. While the novels and comics were obviously made for young adults and older readers, the Little Golden Books and LEGO stories were clearly made for children. And I don't know who needs to hear this, but children aren't booking $2,400 cruises. Disney, you had an interesting idea, but you flew it straight into the sun. That being said, I appreciate that Disney hasn't tried to hide this failure. In today's age of digital media, companies are quick to bury their failures and remove available media. Thankfully, all the LEGO specials are still on Disney Plus or YouTube, the comics are on the Marvel Unlimited app, and the books are still sold wherever books are sold near you. Hey everyone, Editor Connor here, with a fun little update that, at the time when I wrote this video, that was true. However, it appears now that Disney has since privated the Vader's Vacation short, which I find interesting because it appears to be one of the only shorts that has been delisted from the Star Wars Kids YouTube page. Just thought I'd throw that 2 cents in there. My bad. Tie-in media is slowly dying out, so I respect Disney for trying, even if this was a ridiculous attempt that failed because of the overly expensive real-world hotel holding it all together. So, while the real-world hotel is gone, now being used for storage, and the Halcyon hasn't made a canon appearance since, I wouldn't give up hope. Currently, Disneyland, not Disney World, is rebranding Galaxy's Edge to take place during the original trilogy, rather than the sequels. This has included a few ventures into tie-in media again, most notably the current ongoing comic, Galaxy's Edge: Echoes of the Empire. This recounts the adventures of the original trilogy heroes and villains on Batuu. Maybe, just maybe, we'll hear a mention of or see an appearance of the Galactic Starcruiser. But maybe that's just some hopeful, curious thinking on my part. I personally think it's very cool that Disney tried to create lore for their failing hotel, even if it was purely for marketing purposes. The Halcyon is 275 years old, which means Lucasfilm still has the entire Star Wars timeline to play around with. What did you think of the lore surrounding the Starcruiser? Did you get to experience the hotel firsthand? Let me know in the comments down below. If you like what you saw here, don't forget to like, subscribe, and hit the bell so you know when that next one's coming. I talk about Star Wars all the time and look forward to talking about it more with you. Thank you for watching, and may the Force be with you.